Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's live episode, Ask Me Almost Anything, starting with the question, what shall I do with this Boar femur? Also known as New Tools, Ask New Questions. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything here at Writing for Screens, a channel which I have created in order to take some of the tools and skills and insights that I had to figure out for myself in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies, and 12 to 18 years before that trying to break in. All the stuff that I had to figure out for myself on my way out of the business, I am trying to leave that stuff behind in some form that you can use to figure out stuff for yourself. That means that I have taken, here's a little screen grab of my main channel page, and if you look down towards the bottom, you'll see a whole bunch of bright thumbnails. Those are these. The first three playlists are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. All of these together, these three playlists together, comprise 50 lesson videos, each one about 10 minutes long, each on a topic. The topic is the title and the thumbnail, so you can just browse the thumbnails, browse list of titles, and see genre, flashbacks, character, dialogue, format, thinking in scenes, all sorts of stuff that you can take little lessons from. There's ideas for you to try, but there is no system, there is no plan, there is no order. You just have to look through it, figure out what works for you. The main thing that I believe is that there is no right or wrong way to be creative. There is no system that everyone has to follow. There is no formula. Every artist must figure out for themselves their own path, what they can do, what they want to do, what they believe in, what they're able to do. All of those things are stuff you got to figure out for yourself, and no one can tell you this is how it goes, because everyone is different and everything you want to do is different. So therefore, all I can do is say, here's some parts, here's some tools, here's some things that you can try to see what works for you. So that's what we're doing here. Having done those 50 lessons, I then started doing live streams. Every Wednesday, I do them at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone. For you who are not in the Pacific Zone, that's where I am. That's what I'm doing. I've also started a SUBSTAck. Please check that out. Here's a picture of it for what that's worth. And I have taken those lessons and put them into a book. All of this information is down below in the description. Okay, hello. I'm going to say some quick hellos. Hello, Sonia. Hello, Ellen. Hello, Thomas. Hello, Nishaj. Black and white today, indeed. Yeah, I've decided I cannot stand the fact that I do this, personally. I wish there was some way to have like an animated character instead of me. And I'm sure there is, but it's way too much work and money. So the main thing is, like, if I could not have my face here at all, if I could not have my voice, that's why I've sort of steered towards Substack. I don't want to be the person. I want to have the ideas, but I don't want to be the person. I'm very tired of looking at myself and hearing myself. So I thought, let's do this. Let's see if I can just sort of tone down the personal experience of me and bring your words up here. Hello, JW Steed. Hello, Michael. Yes, I am in black and white on purpose. Hello, Memphis. The purpose is just to try and stop looking and start listening and start thinking. That's what I'm doing. So let's get right to the main topics. Then, of course, people will ask questions. But the topics I had in mind are, last week, at the end of the live stream, after the live stream, I felt bad. I felt like I had not gotten to a good place with a couple of the topics that came up. Particularly, someone had asked about the idea of using AI to generate film stuff, like the film version of your writing or your project. If you could not, basically the idea is like, hey, I don't have a film studio. This particular person was saying, I'm doing a historical drama. I'm never going to be able to get together the tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars needed to film these battle scenes in this, 17th century war. So what's wrong with me saying I could have AI create the images? And I was not clear on that, and I was troubled by what I said about it. So I'd like to get back into that. So that's a lot of what's going on. Before I do that, I want to get into one other topic that I realized I raised a problem, meaning to then offer a solution, and I didn't. I just showed the problem, which was I was talking about the cathedral. This is all the same question, which is suppose you can't do what you want to do. Like suppose you want to make a movie because you've seen all these incredible special effects movies and action movies or whatever they are, and that's where your talent goes. That's where your desire goes. But you can't. What it takes to do that is literally tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. Hang on a second. Let me see. I'm afraid my voice is distorting a little. Okay. And so I said, suppose this. Suppose you were into architecture and you really loved Gothic cathedrals, those magnificent, medieval and Renaissance creations, which took hundreds of years to build, and untold numbers of people and untold amounts of money. And I think that, and the question was, if you wanted to do that, if that was your artistic ambition, which is the equivalent of doing a Marvel movie, for instance, or a Star Wars movie, what should you do? And I said, the most important thing is to recognize how unlikely it is that you will be able to do that. The truth is that if you were a writer, for instance, of a Marvel movie, you would be one of 30 writers. The fact is, no one person writes those. There are so many drafts. There are so many people get hired. And this vision, like the sort of George Lucas image of this guy who comes up with this mythology on his own, and then he builds not only the universe, but the special effects and the whole studio and the sci-fi, ILM company. All of that comes from this one guy. If that could have ever happened before, and to a certain extent, yes, it happened for him. It hasn't happened for anybody else. Anybody. So therefore, my point was, you have to recognize that. You have to recognize that just because you can look at a cathedral, just because you can love a cathedral, does not mean you can make a cathedral. The question that the thing I didn't add to that was, well, what do you do then if you want to make a cathedral? You want to make the grand thing beyond your abilities. And this is what I wanted to get to. If you can't build a cathedral, there are things you can still do. You can make a model of a cathedral. You can make the plans for a cathedral. You could create a whole book of every single detail in architectural drawings. Or you can use the ideas for a cathedral, your love of cathedral, your feelings about the cathedrals, and use them in the buildings you can make, which might just be a shed in your backyard, or if you actually do go to architecture school and learn how to do it, you might get to build some houses that use the design concepts that you want to create in that place in very, very different ways. To say, what can I do with sheetrock and studs to create this arching, gorgeous spiritual space? Likewise, if you wanted to do, a Star Wars universe, and you can't make that movie because it costs $200 million to make one of those movies, and you're talking about a world of dozens of those movies. That's the output of a small country. Okay, we're not likely to get that, but we could create graphic novels, create regular novels, write the scripts and do the designs, whatever it is that you want to do. There are alternative paths if you stop looking at the weird climactic achievements of certain parts of our culture and say, that is the only thing. That's the path I'm trying to get to. My main point is, use the tools you have. Use the the reality that you're in and build from there. You know, in Watts in Los Angeles, there's an area called there's a place called the Watts Towers, which is this guy who was a construction worker, spent years and years and years, I think maybe even decades, building essentially his own cathedral, by hand, by himself, with the concrete and stuff around. They are a monument. They are a gorgeous, amazing monument. That's his cathedral. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that, to try and take this idea that it is important to be realistic about what it takes to do these accomplishments. And the fact that someone great did a great thing doesn't mean if you can't do that thing, you can't do your great thing. You just have to recognize that sometimes you're Einstein or Shakespeare, sometimes you're Clifford Odets or you know, somebody or John Waters. You know, you do what you can do. That's really what I'm trying to get to. And I think it's very important that we try and be real about that, instead of this illusion that everyone is going to be George Lucas. We're not. We're not. They're partly because George Lucas, by doing what he did, he changed the business so that the large corporations said, oh, well, we're not going to let any individual do that anymore. We're going to do that. In terms of ownership, in terms of control. George Lucas wouldn't have been able to do any of it if he hadn't carved out for himself the merchandising rights to Star Wars, which in 1976 or 7, nobody cared about. It's like, who cares about the merchandising rights for a movie? That changed everything. So, but that you can't do that anymore because he did that and they realized what it was. Okay, so now I want to get into the other topic that came up, which was about this AI, using AI to direct a short or a version of the thing that you imagine. And my instinct when I first said it was to say, I kind of feel no. I kind of feel it's not okay. And I'm going to put off towards the back end of this the non-creative reasons it's not okay, because there are very serious ones. But let's just talk about the creative side of this. And the first thing is the question of, is AI just a tool, or is it in some way different? The reason I brought up the reason I called this the Boar femur is, for those of you who don't understand the reference, in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, the beginning section called The Dawn of Man shows a group of pre-human creatures, and they are visited by a giant black monolith, a big slab of something. And when they touch it, it basically changes their evolution. It advances their evolution and allows them to understand the use of tools. And the way that we see this is through a series of shots in which one of these Neanderthals who touched the monolith begins to pick up a bone, the femur, the thigh bone of a boar, and he begins to understand that he can use it as a tool and, in fact, as a weapon to kill further boars. And we're gonna push to the side the question of, are all tools weapons? And simply say that the question is there a danger? Is there a downside to the use of tools? Or are tools a part of us, a part of humanity, a part of how humanity works, and what in fact defines people, defines creativity? You're always using tools. Is AI just another tool? Which at first seemed like, it's bad. But the truth is, the context of the question, the goals, the parameters of the question matter. Because, for instance, one of the main defining elements of this, I think, is whether or not you are taking credit for the work of the tool. And this at first seems sort of obvious. Like, if there's a woman out there who is writing She has started writing novels, romance novels. She fed a lot of romance novels into an AI program and then said, write me another one, write me, various types, subgenres of romance novels. And that's, to me, out and out cheating, out and out improper use of a tool. But interestingly, she doesn't really make that much money from the novels. She makes money from selling classes on how you too can write novels without writing novels. That's, to me, an obvious no-go. That is cheating. If you want to put it better, it could also be considered theft or stealing. But here's the question. Suppose you just want to do it for fun. Suppose you just want to do it to use it as a sample. In other words, as a part of a pitch in order to give people an idea of what you think something should look like. There has been a trend in Hollywood in the past 10 years on these pitch decks. In other words, if you even have a script and you're just a writer, but you still have to come in with a producer and with a deck of images stolen from other movies and art forms and say, this is what it's going to look like. And then you show pictures of actors that you have no chance of contacting and say, this is sort of what the actor would be like. Like, oh, I bet Leo would be great in this. And this will be, to me, this is all an enormous layer of merchandising crap over the question of whether the script works. But the truth is, it's required for the business. So therefore, to say, I'm going to have AI do up some designs where I'm going to say, hey, take some imagery from this movie and from that movie, but then have this character doing this thing in my script, and it puts out a little clip. Is that wrong? Like morally? I don't know. I don't know if I would consider that wrong. I consider it's kind of, once again, it's like back in the 70s and 80s, if you were going to go to to Cannes or to any of the film markets with a project that you wanted to sell, you would have them put together a poster of a movie that hadn't been made yet, a poster of a movie that hadn't been financed or even cast yet. So therefore, you were making a poster, often putting movie stars' faces on them, and then they would take that and they would say, hey, imagine how cool this will be. Is it sleazy? Yes. Is it unrealistic? Yes. Is it part of my creative problem with AI? No. It's just a crappy side thing. My question is more this. I began to think about the number of things I do that are creatively cheating. For instance, when I do the graphics for this live stream, like this one here, which I did yesterday, boom. Okay, I did that on a program, a site called Canva. You probably know about it. It's a graphics program in which you can use pre-made designs, like here's a birthday card, here's 25,000 birthday cards. Pick this one. Now you just put in your message and there's a picture of a birthday cake and a balloon and maybe it's animated and whatever. I never use any pre-made elements in Canva, but I do use, like, I didn't make that font myself. I chose from a selection of fonts. I set the spacing and to the extent that I could. It's relatively limited, and the colors, but I didn't make that. Is that, like, if I was a designer, if I was claiming to be a designer, I would have to say, yeah, I did it, but I did it with Canva. I mean, I looked through their list of fonts and I chose one and I stuck it on there. When I use my camera or my phone camera, I very often will run the pictures through a app called Hipstamatic. Hipstamatic has all these cool filters, changes the texture of the image. It can change the contrast, change the color values, put focus or flares onto things. It's great. There's some that make it look kind of retro or black and white, like this program is doing for me. The question is that cheating. Like, here's the question. If I was going to go to a gallery and show them my picture and say, I want you to sell my photographs as photographs, would I have to say, I used Hipstamatic to get that effect? I do kind of feel like you would have to say that. On the other hand, choosing which film you use, if it was an actual film camera, would be the same thing. I just, instead of choosing a physical roll of film that has higher or lower contrast, higher or lower grain, I'm going to a digital service that adds the grain. Is there a difference? That's the place where I start to get a little uneasy. And yet, for creative writing, which is the only thing I can, like, the point about all these is that I'm doing them personally. I'm doing them. I put some photographs on my on the Substack, and frankly, they were filtered with Hipstamatic, and I like the way they look. Should I not be claiming that I did? I probably should always say, used Hipstamatic to make this photograph. But the issue is, how and why are we judging or dividing the use of these tools? And I think, just to get down to my final point about this, I think that the main issue has to do with whether or not the app is making choices for you. If the AI is coming up with sentences, then you're not writing. If the AI chose the composition of the picture, or chose the topic, or chose the style. If I opened up Hipstamatic and it said, we're going to do this kind of filter for you, without me choosing it, or then I don't feel that that's right. You need to be making the choice in order to call it creative work. I also believe you do have to credit or acknowledge or indicate that you have used a filter of some kind. And this is tricky, but I remember thinking it in the 1980s and 90s, a bunch of directors started to use filters a lot. There was actually a cluster of British movie directors who had started out as commercial directors. And they used a lot of filters. They also used a lot of smoke. Ridley Scott, Alan Parker. And sometimes I would watch those heavily filtered shots, like in something like Tony Scott's Days of Thunder, where there's just like this giant slab of gradiated orange over like a scene. I'd be like, man, that's not real. You threw a filter on there. Is that wrong? I don't think so. So why would it be wrong to do that digitally instead of with a piece of glass that's got orange tinting to it? I do believe that you should, if you are using an app or a digital process, you should acknowledge it. And then the other thing is, what are you doing with it? For instance, if I'm saying I am a movie director, part of the job, most of the job of movie director is in fact collaborating with people who are doing the work. Now, isn't that the same as if you were to tell the AI to do the work, to say, design me a costume? What's the difference between going to a costume designer, and saying, design me a costume, I kind of want to look like this movie and I kind of want it to be yellow. And then they come back with some sketches and then you tinker with it and they do it again. Why is that different from an AI doing it? That is a serious question. I do know that for writing, I don't believe it is okay. If you said, write me a paragraph that describes this character falling down a well, to me, that's not okay. That would be the equivalent of having someone else direct for you. In other words, for you to say to the director, I want you to do this, and then the director does the thing. There's like, if you're saying you're the director, then you can't ask the director to do it. I guess that's sort of where I'm coming down, is that a lot of this has to do with the measure of choice and control that you have, and then the amount that you are claiming ownership or creation of it. Those are the two places where I think you have to weigh whether or not you can use AI legitimately. Now, I did want to point out there are non-creative issues on this. First of all, almost all of this AI has been learning on work that they did not credit or pay for. That is completely unacceptable. And honestly, I believe that all of those AI programs should be thrown out. They should be trashed. Any AI that took stuff that other people did without credit and without payment and used to feed into the learning, to me, that's literally theft. That's literally cheating. It should not be allowed. Second of all, is the AI putting people out of the jobs? Are you, by doing that, putting costume designers out of jobs? And the answer is yes. And that is a serious problem. The even more serious is the environmental issue about the amount of power and water and resources that are going into these systems that create this AI, and whether it's worth it to be able to make a funny, TikTok at the cost of wiping out the ecosystem in another state. Big problem for me. So that's another reason not to use current AI. Finally, almost all of the companies that are creating AI are doing it in a unregulated, mysterious and uncontrolled way that serves their interests, not the public. And it probably should be more regulated like a utility. And all of those things are reasons to say, even if it was creatively okay to use this, it may not be okay for other reasons. Those are the things that I was thinking about. Let's see what you guys are thinking. Okay, so first of all, thank you for those of you who said that you like the look. Okay, hello, Yigit. Okay, JW Steed has very strong feelings. I already know that going in without even reading this. I am also doing a historical drama and will never use AI. I will do a webtoon or an audiobook if I'm never able to turn it into a TV show. Here's my question to you, Steed, though. Suppose when you're doing your webtoon, or I have friends who are voice actors. Okay, what if you didn't? Hire them to do voices and audio sound effects. If it's successful, maybe it will be picked up, maybe not. At least it's made. I got to applaud that. I think that is great. That is exactly the cathedral question I was asking before. My question is, when you do those sound effects, for instance, will you be taking them from a library? And if so, are you using a free library? There are issues where it comes up, but Steed, you are welcome to take your stand. I am certainly not saying that you should not. I'm saying we have to question when we apply our beliefs or stands to other people, what the use is that they're putting it towards, and what the and what their situation is. Steed says, back in the 1920s through 50s, when Hollywood refused to make films with black people, they made their own, quote, race films. All black cast and production. Basically, they invented independent film. They found a way. Yes, absolutely. That's a slightly different issue of access as opposed to whether or not, for instance, if those people who were making their own independent films wanted to make one that had a big MGM musical number, they might have run into trouble trying to build that set for that money. And the question is, would it be okay to get an AI to create a backdrop, for instance? Steed says, you can hire an audience to draw spaceships, get models from shops, and create spaceships. Use the rubbish in your recycling bin if that's the only choice. Doctor Who used plungers and whisks for weapons. Absolutely true. On the other hand, I guess what I'm asking is, depending on, like, the reason I don't use more sophisticated, personally controlled photographic filters, for instance, like why don't I just learn how to use For instance, some kind of Photoshop type layer, which I add afterwards, in which I control every single element? And the answer is, it's too hard for me to learn. I simply don't have the time in my life to advance my knowledge of photographic image manipulation in those softwares. They are way complicated. I did try. I actually went on them and I was like, the number of commands, the number of possible elements would require so much training that I simply could not allow that into my life. That's the tricky thing. So I guess what I'm saying is, if I am an amateur photographer, if I am a hobbyist photographer, and this tool is available to me, the question is, at what point do we cross the line between digital tools and AI tools? And this is a very, very complicated thing, because there's essentially an AI in the sense of a program which is following certain rules that it operates on and applying them to your layering. Where is that line? And all I'm saying is, I can't wholeheartedly say you absolutely should never do that. On the other hand, I can wholeheartedly say, if you do that and you pretend you didn't, then you are cheating. Then you are not the creator that you say you are. Red Blade. Hello, Glenn. About making a character talk instead of you personally. I've heard FaceRig is an easy software for that. Thank you. I may actually get down to that, but my guess is FaceRig is essentially AI generating. But cool. Yeah, no, I've been just playing with it. Thank you, Red Blade. Ellen says, I'm so happy we're going back to this topic of AI. As a 12th grade teacher, I have thoughts. Yes. Well, that's also the tricky thing. Yes, I'm trying to stick specifically to the creative element, but in terms of like schoolwork, there's a whole other layer of, if the AI is doing your research for you, first of all, can you trust it? That's the big problem. No, you can't trust it. You can't trust these companies. You can't trust the information. You can't trust the software to actually tell you the truth. Okay. Sonia says, agrees with Steed. I build models, and interestingly, once I have that prop, I get even more ideas for scenes and how to write them better with the visual aid I made. Yes. Steed says, I watch a lot of film and TV commentaries and love when they're like, hey, so this scene, we had no money, so we used PVA glue and glitter for this. And that shot, we put the camera on a cat's collar. Yes, absolutely. That is completely true. Big fan of guerrilla filmmaking. Me also. Okay. Memphis, I can't point out why, but stories written with the help of AI always feel so soulless, but people seem to enjoy them and can't tell the difference between stories written by human or AI. Yes, this is my problem too. And my problem with that is, even more than just AI, I have a big problem with all those how-to books and classes, which for the past 30 years have been doing the non-digital version of AI. In other words, when you read even Sid Field, who I love, or Truby, or any number of there's so many how-to screenwrite formula books in which they will say, these are the places that your story has to go. Okay, when you're doing that, that is to me, frankly, exactly the same as having the AI come up with your outline. In other words, if I'm going to go to a 3-day seminar in how to tell a story and how the classic story structure always works and should never be changed, you are essentially, you're going to create soulless work. And it is a problem that has been generated over time. But it was also true back in the studio days. People would say, the studios, they just have these, some studio heads, department head of story, which they had, would say, all right, we always have to have a happy ending. Oh, I don't like stories where the guy gets talked down to by his wife, whatever it is. And it would soulless up, it would make the stories formulaic. And that is true. AI is obviously just worse at it. But that is my problem too. It is absolutely a troubling issue of following a formula, whether or not you're following the formula or the AI is. The thing about an AI is no matter what people are saying about AI, it is not doing any creative thinking at all. It is averaging. And that averaging is exactly the same as someone who watched 30 classic movies and said, okay, they all have happy endings, so therefore all stories must have happy endings. And therefore everything that comes out of that theory is going to become a formula. And we have seen that happen since the 1980s when this kind of thinking began to become the way that screenwriting was taught. In other words, every single one of these books says you have to have a turning point at this point, you have to have a low point at this point, you have to have a main character who goes on a journey. None of those things are true in the have to. You don't have to. And some good work comes out of not doing that. So my problem is that AI is simply further formularizing. And that really, really bothers me. But I do have to point out that that's not just AI. That is the thought of anyone who is trying to do creative work in such a way that they don't have to suffer the problems of creativity, which is uncertainty and making choices. And that so much of that is some attempt to guarantee success. In other words, success in that you will get approval of the companies that are the only ones with the tens of millions of dollars, or success in that having run through that company, you will get to the audience and the audience will buy more tickets than somebody else's movie. Those things are troubling creative prompts. In other words, that's really what's happening, is that somebody is saying to the company, and the company is saying to you, all right, we are looking for what we think most people like, so that we're going to do that by checking what they liked last month or last year, and we are going to say, okay, let's do more of that. That is what AI does, and it's been done since the beginning of art, probably, but particularly in the corporate era of filmmaking, which kind of started with filmmaking, with the studios, but especially boomed in the 1980s and 90s. Steed says, I think people like the formulaic and predictable stuff they don't have to think about, but I agree it's soulless, close something out immediately when it feels like that. Yes, this is the problem. The problem is, for any art form, there is going to be a formula, and that formula rapidly becomes what we are calling soulless. It becomes mechanical and inauthentic. Okay, Michael says, cartoons Crusader Rabbit and Stop Action Gumby couldn't compete with Disney, but created great entertainment every week. Use still backgrounds to save money. Yeah, absolutely. There is indeed... There are always going to be examples of people being inventive when they couldn't find access to the biggest spectacles of their time, whether that's giant stage work. But here's, I guess, my point is, to me, what I think is interesting is we do like spectacle. I do like spectacle. I'm not going to say that I don't want to see Star Wars, because I do. And I don't want, and the thing is, before Star Wars, there's the spectacle of David Lean going to the desert to film Lawrence of Arabia, dragging all these trucks and people out to the middle of the desert so he could get some spectacular landscape, and then put a tiny camel riding towards you in it. And it was an amazing experience that you could only have through film. And only have through big studio films, because no one else had the money and technical expertise to make that happen. What I think is interesting is when somebody says, how can I get that feeling without that at all? With not trying to imitate that, but to say, what is that effect? What is that experience? Or somebody who says, I have seen enough theater when theaters were prosceniums with gorgeous sets and very elaborate costumes and big curtains. And they said, we can't do that. But not only that, it is beginning to feel empty. It is beginning to feel like the sets and the costumes are more of a point than the drama. What if we stripped it down to a couple of people on a stage with nothing behind them at all? That's where I think you get some interesting ideas. Instead of just saying, well, we could paint a smaller backdrop than the big Broadway backdrop. Okay. Thomas Lewis says, in 1874, Mark Twain presented the first novel written on a typewriter. Is that true? Was he cheating by not hand printing out the letters himself? Exactly. But this is where I think it's important to differentiate. The typewriter does not choose the words. The typewriter is simply a mechanical method by which you can write faster and neater. That's the only thing a typewriter does. A typewriter is a tool that does one thing, like a saw only can cut stuff. That's all you can do with a saw, although I guess you can play music on it too. But if you have a handsaw and you can use it to cut wood, I would not say that it is cheating to cut wood with a saw instead of using an axe or something. It's simply a different method by which you are making a mechanical process faster or easier or cleaner. So there's a big difference between the first novel written on a typewriter and the first novel that was written by focus group. In other words, that's where you actually get into the AI question, is if somebody says, I'm going to get 12 average Americans and I'm going to say, would you rather have this be about advertising or about pirates? And they go pirates. And you say, okay, then that's what I'm doing. That's where I think you have a problem, because you are losing the creative control that an artist uses to be creative. The typing itself, I don't feel is a problem. But the interesting thing is, there is a legitimate artistic argument to saying, what if I make a novel by focus group? What if I put out, on X or Twitter, a bunch of questions, polls? Should this be about pirates or advertising? Okay, pirates. Should the hero be a male pirate or a female pirate? And in a sense, if you were doing that and then saying, I wrote this story from this process, wouldn't that be a legitimate creative enterprise? I kind of think it would. It's tricky. It is very tricky, because what that you then have happen is with AI, it goes a further step, which is to say, I want a pirate movie, and AI then takes the pirate movie database that it has collected and says, of these pirate movies, these elements showed up more times than others, so we're going to use those elements. In other words, it's doing the creative work for you. That's where I have the problem. Dodge City in Gunsmoke was a fake background. Well, it was actually a real, they physically built it. It was just not a real town. The only thing that counts was the characters who delivered the dialogue. Yes, although here's the thing. There was a designer, a creator, who built that fake town. They chose which places were there. They decided which ones had big doors and which ones had little doors and which ones had balconies. And they did that for artistic and visual reasons. They said, in my taste, we need to have this building be a little lower because it's overshadowing the others. So the tricky thing about Dodge City and Gunsmoke is, yes, it was not a real town, but it was a real creation. That's where you get into complicated stuff. Okay. Ellen says, I tell my students that AI is a tool and not a substitute for their thinking. Yes, exactly the same thing I'm saying. You are allowed to use it in limited ways, brainstorming, grammar checks, but their voice and ideas need to be their own. Yes, although I have a real problem with the brainstorming people. That's something that I hear a lot. People saying, I'm using AI to brainstorm. But brainstorming is one of the primary creative acts of writing. In fact, what I feel is, if when you literally, every time you write a sentence or a story idea, you are micro brainstorming. In other words, you think, oh, I want this to be a detective story. And then you brainstorm, well, what happens in detective stories? And you come up with a series of answers. That choice, that idea that you thought in your head of all the detective stories you personally have seen and the ones that you liked compared to the ones you didn't like, steers your ability to say, I'm going to do this one with a detective who's addicted to opium. and that's going to be the hook of the story. That choice, that brainstorming possibility came from you alone. It came from the weird combination of you. And if you move that to an AI or even to a focus group, you are not creating. It becomes a stunt, like, frankly, if you were to do that with a focus group and say, I'm asking 50,000 people, what should this detective's quirk be? And I list a bunch of them, or ask them to list a bunch of them. For me, that's the dividing line. That's where you can't do it. Brainstorming, outlining, any of those things, those are creative choices. Those are creative acts. And that's where it worries me when somebody says, well, I'm going to have AI outline this for me, any more than somebody who says, I have gone to, what's his name? The big story guy, Robert McKee. I'm going to go through McKee and I'm going to take notes on all of his points and I'm going to use them to make my outline. That actually bugs me because you are essentially saying whatever McKee said, that I'm not going to make that choice. McKee made that choice for me. Instead of saying, well, McKee says this, but on the other hand, this other movie completely did not do that. And I need to decide which one I like. That's your creativity at work. And if you just follow McKee, that's AI as far as I'm concerned. That's pre-digital AI is following the formula of any other person. Not to say you can't take it in, but you're judging it based on your instincts and your background. That's the big, big difference. Don't forget, AI is built off slave labor, literal slave labor, primarily in Kenya. Yes, separate question. I absolutely agree that as far as societal and moral and environmental and financial issues, AI is completely objectionable. Unfortunately, so is most of the internet. All true, absolutely. I am limiting my conversation on this to the creative questions because it's the only thing I feel I have any valuable points to make that other people don't know more about than me. Okay, an animation movie may be AI. Human writes the screenplay. Okay, AI writes it fully. AI movie. Where's the threshold of wrong? The problem may be that it dilutes the art, sort of low quality. Yes, that's a separate question. The question of, is AI simply not good at what it does? And the answer is most of the time, yes. However, I don't think that should be the dividing line on this question, because AI could get better. And I don't believe that the answer is, oh, well, just make AI better. I believe the question is, if you're saying an AI movie written by a human but animated by AI is okay, my answer would be, that's certainly true as a writer. That's like when I cook, and I like to cook, but sometimes I just use some jar sauce. I'm making some pasta and I get a jar of ragu and I use the ragu sauce and I put it on the pasta, and I'll throw in some other spices or some other stuff to kind of mess with it a little, throw in some olives or something. But basically, I did not cook that sauce, which is fine if I'm just making myself dinner. And if you're just making yourself an animation and you don't know how to animate, but you want to see it, I can't say that's wrong. But I can say, if I were to take my ragu spaghetti sauce and put it on pasta, throw some olives in it, and then present it to others and say, I made this sauce, I would be lying. I would be cheating. If I sold it to people, if I opened a restaurant and took my AI sauce and I put it on the pasta and I sold it to them, I said, here, have our restaurant sauce, That would be even more cheating. And that's, to me, that is one of the main differentiation points. Okay. AlphaUville uses a flashing light bulb and a voice to create a billion-dollar computer. Absolutely. And I am such a big fan of the many ways even old studio films had to deal with the fact that they couldn't do what they wanted to do. And we have hit a weird moment. For the first time, it is pretty possible, depending on your support with finance, to do anything. That there's nothing that you can imagine that you cannot visualize. That's very recent. And if you even look at the special effects of movies made only 30 years ago, it is shocking how much they could not do. So I don't know. That's a tricky one, because the answer is that inventiveness is a separate thing from the ability to build a Western street. If you're doing a Western, how do you do it without building that Western street? That's tricky. Alexis says, the fact that those costume sets and images were crafted according to someone's skills and sensibilities are exactly what makes them valuable. Yes, they are not commodities to be deployed at anyone's whim. Categorically opposed to this, and I will explain again, even though chat comments are very limited. Prompt costumes or sets or images has no equivalence to having craftsmen doing that, because assistive AI that deals with mechanical and analytical processes, image upscaling, sound cleaning. Oh, because plus. Okay, well, we didn't get the rest. Oh, okay. Sorry, Alex. It went in the wrong order. Okay. Categorically opposed to this, and I will explain again, even though chat comments are very limited. Prompt costumes, sets, or images have no equivalence to having craftsmen do them, because the fact that those costume sets and images were crafted according to someone's skills and sensibilities are what makes them valuable. Yes, we are in complete agreement, and I think it would be hard. I definitely do not find a lot of worth in the people whose argument is, well, the computer is doing creative work, whereas the people, which is exactly the same as the computer, as the people. That is clearly not true. There is no there is no ability to break the routine, the formula in the computer at this moment. And everyone keeps, in the tech world, everyone keeps saying, when we get good enough, the AI will make this leap to not just averaging or not just following an algorithm to make choices, but actually making those creative leaps that are creativity. They say that, but it has never once actually happened. And everyone keeps saying, we're going to get to that. We're absolutely going to get to that. There's no actual evidence that we will. And furthermore, if we do, the philosophical and social questions that come from the idea that if we do invent eventually a machine that is actually, in some sense, conscious and creative, what have we done? That is not something we should do lightly, because then if we unplug it or change its code, we are literally killing it. And I think we have to really think about that. So that's a separate issue. But the answer is, currently, Alex and I agree, there is a substantial difference between what AI is doing and creativity. AI is sorting, AI is ranking, but AI is not creating. Okay. Redblade, I really like your approach to the question on if using AI is acceptable from the POV of creative reasons. It's a weighted look and a very interesting insight. Oh, thank you. Measuring the decisions, right. Yeah, like I said, spaghetti sauce. There are times I want to make my own spaghetti sauce. When I make my own spaghetti sauce, I still use canned tomatoes. I mean, now and then I'll go to the farmer's market, get actual tomatoes, boil them to get the peels off, and then mash them up, and then I'll make sauce out of them. And it's really good, and you can tell the difference. However, most of the time, I just buy canned tomatoes. However, and so therefore I would say, did I make that sauce from scratch? No. Did I make that sauce? Yes. It's different from doing that than buying a jar of sauce. The question is, creatively speaking, if you are a writer who wants to see your work for the fun of it or to learn something from it, and you want to essentially get canned tomatoes or even buy jar tomatoes and put them in there and see what happens to your script when it's animated, I don't think that that's a crime. I think that it's a crime because you're using machinery that's corporate and evil, as Steve has pointed out. But I think that the question is, are you taking credit for things that are not created? And B, are you claiming to be the professional creator of a thing you did not create? That's where I draw the line. Okay. AI is trained off the crap save the cat formulas. Training soulless stuff on already soulless stuff equals more soulless. Yes, and I wish it was trained on save the cat, but a lot of it, I think, is simply trained on scripts that were trained on save the cat. In other words, save the cat and McKee and certain other formulas came out. Over the years, they became very popular with the movie studios. In other words, the people buying and making scripts loved those formulas because it gave them a way to judge. They could say, I trust this to produce a hit, and therefore it has to fit that formula. That created a feedback loop in which the writers said, if I'm going to get the studio to buy my script, I'd better give them the formula they require. That was a fully non-digital circle of formulaic AI thinking. What's happened now is that pile of scripts, we're talking 30, 40 years worth of scripts being fed through that loop, have now created soulless scripts, which, and honestly, you see a lot of them. I mean, sometimes they're entertaining, but there's a distinct feeling between talented work and formula work. And sometimes formula work can be fine, but if you are attuned to it, you know that you feel it. The question is it legitimate to enjoy something that's bad in terms of the highest realm of that art? And the answer is, of course, it's okay to. I like a lot of formulaic soulless crap. I'll watch a fair amount of it, but I don't want to say to someone who likes it, "Oh, you are a failure. You are bad. You are an idiot." That's not true. You're allowed to like what you like. The question is, if you are saying you're going to make it, and you are going to say that you are making it when you didn't make it, is that okay? I asked AI how a military sci-fi story sounds. It gave examples, but it didn't feel right. I decided to write the story in my style, not recommended average. If readers don't like it, oh well. Sonia, I feel content that I can support that decision, and what's more, 2 thumbs up. Okay. Assistive AI that deals with mechanical and analytical processes like sound cleaning and organizing rushes is another matter. That's where I get to it, because that's like a typewriter. In other words, if you can, now sound cleaning is actually tricky because that's an art. When it really comes down to it, you need a person to go over that sound cleaning and work on some of it. If you're a real sound engineer, you are going to not want AI to do that for you. However, that's like saying, how fast can you type on the typewriter? That's a separate thing. There's artistic choices and there's mechanical processes. And I agree, it's very important to separate them and to recognize that it is okay to use mechanical processes, depending on the cost. And I don't mean the moral cost, the social cost of those particular, like, the typewriter companies were not destroying the world. They really weren't. Okay. In class, we were given crayons to create a picture. Can't do it, teacher. I need AI. Yes, indeed. I'm going to stick only to the question of creativity. Okay. Leah says, Sonia, when you have a story alive in you, you're the only one in the universe who can write it. No AI, no other person. With AI, we can write mass production, all of us. Yes, yeah. For instance, and this is a problematic question from the beginning. Andy Warhol raised this question. For instance, Andy Warhol would have other people make movies for him and then say, Andy Warhol's, whatever. He did not make that movie. He very often had nothing to do with it except to watch it and go, yeah, that's fine. Or Andy Warhol created, literally, he called his art studio The Factory because he would have other people making his paintings and silkscreen paintings. At what point is that branding, but not creativity? Was it the creative act for Andy Warhol to invent the factory and the specific process choices, the prompts of Andy Warhol's factory to say, okay, now take a picture of Elvis and now take a picture of Elizabeth Taylor and run them through my process? Was the creativity creating the process? Or is he just AI? Okay. Alex and Alexis, and it's two, so it's been an hour, so I'm going to say let's slow down on the questions. But thank you for discussing this. Okay, yes. Plus, there's no way that generative AI will not completely dilute the value of large scope productions precisely because the resources those productions require are what makes it impressive. Yes, absolutely. Now, this is actually a tricky thing. As special effects have gotten better, two things have happened. One, you tend to get a crappy good special effects. And second of all, sometimes the machinery of the special effects limit the creativity of the writing and directing and acting that is supposed to be steering that CGI. Be it live action or CGI, if all of a sudden anyone can output scale while sitting on their toilet, it literally pushes everything down the drain. Quite literally. I'm not sure about the toilet connection, but I will say, yes, this is absolutely a problem. There came a problem with each technological advance in any art form, where like for instance, overdubbing in records. At a certain point, people got so reliant on the quality of studio production for records that they became dull and boring. They became routine and ritual. And that's when punk and rock and roll and jazz and all these other things came to break down the technological layer of formulaic, successful popular media. That does repeatedly happen and is happening again. Absolutely. That is exactly the explanation I was looking for, Glenn. Twain still did all the writing. Yes, Thomas is the one who pointed out that Mark Twain reportedly did the first novel written on a typewriter. Typewriter is a tool. It's no different than a paintbrush or a pen. There's a big difference between that and something which chooses the words. Okay. Asking AI or a focus group isn't as interesting as letting them ask the author questions. Yeah, that's actually true. It's one of the things I was thinking about doing here online. There is a certain creativity in the questions, but I feel there's more if in the answers the author chooses. Actually, that is a very cool point, Haskell. Haskell's saying, if you wanted to collaboratively create, instead of you creating questions and offering them to a focus group, which is essentially what AI is doing, Haskell is saying the thing to do is to say, let the focus group ask you stuff. And that, because first of all, they will ask the questions is in fact a creative process, because they are thinking, what questions have I heard? What questions do I genuinely want an answer to, et cetera, et cetera. So they are choosing, they are creating. And then you would create from that, because your answer would be your personal creative response to that creative question. That's actually a very cool point, Haskell. I hadn't thought of that. Okay. We got a whole other topic, and it's important. The critic, 403, says, I am depressed. I don't know how to come out of it to start writing again. Okay, very important question, very important issue. Let's talk. Critic, I hope you're still here. Here's the deal. Two things are happening at the same time, and I need to check on which one is happening. When you say, I am depressed, I don't know how to come out of it to start writing again, that suggests to me that you have depression, which is a psychological, mental malady, a condition which limits your ability to be creative or even functioning. If what you're saying is you have depression and therefore it's getting in the way of your creativity, whether or not it is chronic or clinical or major or any other, the point is you are feeling that depression. It could be in response to a particular thing that's happening. It could be simply a biological system within you that sometimes raises and lowers. The main thing is to separate out and not expect writing to solve your depression, because it can't. It's personally for me, I have found that writing can over time keep depression at bay. I had times when I was very depressed, but I'm not sure if the thing is there are different kinds of depression. The depression that comes from bad circumstances or emotional conflicts is very different from the biological, whatever chemical or electromagnetic things are happening in your brain, which may come out of the clear blue sky and be not caused by anything except some kind of biological mechanism. In those cases, you need to do things to deal with the depression separate from the creative work. However, what I would offer is work on the depression, exercise, therapy, possibly medication, depends on what you and the therapist work out about that and what your personal body can work on that. Separate issue. The important thing is to not say art is supposed to save you from an external physical reality. Just like writing can't save you from being behind on your rent. And so it's very important to solve those two problems separately. However, I have found personally that writing in very, very small ways, but routinely every day, no matter what, can help stave off the sense of helplessness and the sense of inertia that depression often gives you. And so what I would say is, first of all, if you're not writing because you don't feel like you can put your thoughts together, that's okay. Don't expect to. Then say, I'm going to write a description. Like, I'm just going to write what is on my desk. Something to simply continue the process of writing, even though it is creatively not very good. That's okay. It is better to do that than to wait until you're better. The truth is, one of the things that can make you better, not always does, is pursuing a routine of things that stimulate or restore your feelings. That would also include physical exercise, good nutrition, ideally dealing with whatever conflicts or social experiences you're having. All of those are things that you need to take on a little bit at a time. If you are having a hard time getting out of the house because of your depression or even getting out of bed, then the first step is to try to do a little. Like, okay, don't go out of the house, but do go to the other room. If you only have one room, go out to the hall and then come back. Go out of your front door, take a breath, walk 3 paces in each direction and then go home. The next day, 4 paces. That kind of thing if you can't even do that, you definitely need some form of support from some supportive person, even if that's an online therapist or a group or anything like that. The other thing is there's plenty of information. There's a really big book called The Noonday Demon about depression, which is a huge study of all sorts of elements about depression. Nothing to do with creativity, just about depression. You might try, I don't know if your depression is so bad that you can't read, that can happen. But if you can, sometimes it's good to learn about the thing that you're experiencing. Sometimes it's better to say, no, I'm going to, watch a detective movie, or I'm going to, juggle or bounce a ball, but among those things, see if there is a way that you can make a ritual for months of just, if you have a story idea that you can't write, try writing one sentence or one bit of description. Not even a full sentence, just write like, wearing a green coat. Okay. Charlie is wearing a green coat. Just write that. Put it aside. The next day, Charlie was wearing a green coat when he met with the chiropractor. Next day, Charlie was wearing a green coat when he met with the chiropractor. The chiropractor stole his wallet. Okay? Whatever it is, just a little tiny bit over time. That's the thing. It might take months for you to get a couple of pages, but eventually, first of all, that practice does tend to help the brain. But second of all, you will find that you are sometimes able to look back on your one sentence at a time and say, oh, I kind of got a rough draft there. This is very, very hard. I do not mean to in any way say, oh, this will solve it. I'm saying it's a good way to work, just like it's a good idea to eat some vegetables and drink some water and have a burger and then, go for a walk around the block if you can. Does that help, critic? Please let me know if that's true. Reach out to me by email if you would like for further talk about this. Writingforscreens.com. You'll find my email there. Okay. Don't. Oh, also, yeah, Leah's making a good point. Write down all those black raptors, how they hunt a character. There's already a hero not needing much invention. Use what you have. Sounds brave, feel free. Yes. The other thing is sometimes it does help to write about what you're experiencing. Separate from your creative writing, but that can also help. Or sometimes, use your creativity or your art, or just not even to be that creative. Rip off stuff, do it. Like there's nothing wrong when you're feeling like you kind of need training wheels to say, I am going to rip off my favorite thriller and I'm going to write another version of it that's only barely disguised. I have done that. I did a script called Nowheresville, which was really just a solid ripoff of Don't Look Now. Which is a great 1970s horror movie. Ellen says, I may reconsider that brainstorming aspect. It did bother me. Followed the current standards, which are AI from our universities. Teaching used to be like, yeah, teaching about AI is a problem. Ellen, though, go to my Substack about teaching and about there's a Substack called Card Catalog in the notes of my Substack, which for those of you who don't know it is Writing for Screens on Substack. In Substack there's a thing called notes. This morning I put a link to an article from another Substack called Card Catalog. Card Catalog is a full-time librarian's analysis of AI. It is Card Catalog Substack. If you're interested in the educational questions about AI, please check out Card Catalog on Substack. Dynamite stuff, Ellen. Please look at that. Okay. Truby says that movies that tend to be popular have more than one genre. What do you think about it? In general, I found this book overly technical. Yes. I have not been able to... Okay. True confession. I have, since the 1980s, since I read oh gosh, now I can't remember. Sid Field. I read Sid Field. I actually like Sid Field. I read a couple others, but honestly, I tried Truby. I tried McKee. I tried Save the Cat. I could not read them. I found them unreadable. I think I kind of skimmed through the Campbell ripoff Vogler screenwriter's journey. I think I got through it, but skimming a lot. I find those books unreadable. I find them very unhelpful. That is actually why I created this, my way of talking about art, because I could not live with them. I could not learn from them. I fight with them. I feel they are wrong. So the answer is, I think that very often Truby, McKee, they have some good insights. However, so the movies that tend to be popular of more than one genre, that's just such an oversimplification. The truth is, any good movie has layers of genre. It has layers of like it's a thriller, but it has some humor, or it has some romance, or there's anything that is just one thing is boring. So therefore, my answer is any creative work you do should be more than one thing. If it is a comedy, it should have a little bit of social comment, or a little bit of real romance, or a real bit of heartache, something in there to give that genre depth. That's what I call depth. But the answer is, what I think is, if it is true that any quality work will have more than one thing going on. Okay, greetings and partings. We'll definitely rewatch the stream from the start. May everyone have a good stream, and may happiness and health with every word you write. Thank you so much, Lake Filter. Okay. AI is like having your dad do your school project. That's true, except I have to admit, when I was in elementary school, my mom is an artist. When I had a project that required drawing or something, sometimes I had her do the figures. I couldn't do it as well as she could. In a couple of years, when it's indistinguishable from real footage, bad agents will withhold or straight up lie that a certain piece is 100% AI just to play the "when you can't tell you like it" card. Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. I wish it weren't so, but I agree. AI is a sounding board, a research tool, an interactive thesaurus, proofreader at no cost. Well, first of all, there is a cost, but second of all, I would agree that here's the thing: as a thesaurus, it's as good as any thesaurus. There's absolutely that in that every different thesaurus pulls different things and chooses different things to be their list of synonyms or antonyms. So sure, why not? Proofreading, to a certain extent. The problem with the any form of AI proofreading, I mean, even now, spell check or language check or grammar checks I turn them off often, because they are checking grammar when I am writing creatively, and my creative writing may require ungrammatical things. So, what are you going to do? It's still not a bad thing. I don't mind having it check and remind me that I forgot a space between two words. Absolutely useful. And completely legit. As a sounding board, you have to remember it's like saying this guy I know in a writing class is a great sounding board because he, tells me what Stanley Kubrick said about this, or he just knows all this stuff that I didn't know. Just remember that that person has their own values. They have their own agenda. They may want to make something sound bad because they're in competition with it. They may want to make something sound good because they feel it makes them impressive that they know it. You have to always check when you're sounding against anybody, getting notes, giving your work to someone. You have to recognize that it is important to understand the choices that gave them their response. And what really bothers me about AI is you can't tell. You don't know what they looked at. You don't know how they are deciding. For instance, if they're deciding according to what made the biggest box office, that would be very different from what made the best critical reviews. And they're not telling you which one they're saying is good. That's my problem. Or they say, oh, well, your first act is a little long. But according to what set of values? That's where I have a problem with it. I think we should ask honestly, is AI a tool or the creator of our project or parts of our project? If the clear answer is tool, we can use it. We have to be honest. I agree, LZ Dog, Skydog. Sea Dog. Best movie about depression. What about Bob? I've never seen that. Is it good? I've heard a lot of of backstage gossip about the production, so I don't know. But I will certainly take that seriously, and anyone who wants to do it. Interesting. Okay, you are welcome, Nishaj. Yeah, I'm heading towards saying goodbye. Ghost Productions. My current script is about how AI is evil and destroys humanity, so very prescient topic. Here's what I would say. AI is currently not evil because AI is just an algorithm. AI is not doing anything. AI has no soul of its own. What's really destroying humanity is the people who are making AI. And that is where I am most upset. If AI does ever become conscious in an actual way, which once again, we have no evidence whatsoever can ever happen. There is theory that it can happen. However, let's remember, there was a theory that the ghosts of our ancestors were controlling our lives. There was a theory that your body had 4 humors and you had to bleed or sugar up the various humors. There's lots of theories about what AI could be, but currently there is no evidence whatsoever that AI can make the leap to consciousness, to what they are calling, the standalone ability to create. Already a fan, says J.W. Steed. Deranged maniacs create an android because they're scared of governments. Androids rebel. All hell breaks loose. Also somehow inspired by the Civil War. That sounds fun. That sounds good. There's certainly a rich territory to get into. Yeah. By the way, if you haven't seen it, there's an Apple TV series about an Murderbot. It's called Murderbot, which is about an android that gets into these questions in a fun way. Remember when Morpheus tells Neo that the peak of human civilization ends in the 21st century when AI is weaponized, absolutely. Likewise, Terminator, obviously, or 2001. I don't think a writing guru who writes books that are unreadable is going to show us how to write. That's true, but there are some people who read them and learn from them. I don't want to say they shouldn't exist. I want to say you have to look at them as a pile of ideas, which you need to choose what you like from. Stephen King's On Writing, Ellen says, that's the only book on writing I was able to get through. That's why I love it here. Yes. I actually, the thing about Stephen King is he's a unique, brilliant talent who is writing as he should about how he works. However, like his thing about adverbs, I don't buy it. I mean, I like adverbs. He's like, don't use adverbs. Everyone writes differently. What's great about Stephen King's On Writing is that he is saying, this is how I do it. And then you can read his and you can read all the others. And then you can say, which ones do I want to do? If you are interested in Stephen King nonfiction, I would actually highly recommend Danse Macabre, which was a study of horror, of the genre of horror. It ends in the 80s when it was written, I think, or the early 90s, but it's just really good. It's like if you're interested in horror, if you're interested in just a good writer talking about things he knows and loves, Stephen King's Danse Macabre. Okay. Well, during my writing of one of my characters said that androids are built on old world drone technology. Warfare is built into their code. More complex than that, but that was a fun quote. Unfortunately, rapidly becoming clear in our real world, drone technology is becoming a serious change in warfare. Also, the people who created the androids are very paranoid characters since they're working on some pretty secret projects. Androids and AI are following their program, but humans are installing it in the first place. Humans are some weird people. So true, Ghost Productions. I absolutely agree. Algorithm is a sly guy, says Ellen. A novel about what happens if AI never works out. Saturn's Children. Huh, I've never heard of it. That sounds good. Okay, great. Thank you all so much. It has been delightful. I have really enjoyed talking to you about all this. We have done good. Thank you for being here. I will see you next week. Go write something.